So I think AEC technology is interesting. Been an interesting space for the last decade or so because there's been so much venture capital. There's been so many kind of companies competing in this space. Been into enough of those construction sites where you walk on with an iPad and they're like, "Ooh, voodoo." No, we don't want any of that. So it's changed a lot over the last, 20 years. It's a very different industry than it used to be. If we just listened to what our customers wanted, we would have had a faster horse.
Yeah, supposedly Henry
You're
Ford.
familiar. Yes. Yeah. So everyone's kind of familiar with that. And, I think the people that are out on site kind of want to solve their problems immediately and they just want this thing that's a bit better. But I think as technology, if you're coming from the technology world, you're looking at these problems in a very different way. You're going, actually, how can we, instead of taking you from 9 to 10, how can we take you from 9 to 20? So you need to listen to those problems and really understand what they are. What you really want to be doing is you want to putting your audience, which typically is going to be, your customer, you want to make them feel like a hero. You want them to be Luke Skywalker. You want them to feel like they can go through this journey from being a farm boy through to being a Jedi. You want to kind of take them on this journey.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. In construction, precision matters. Every budget line, every schedule, every document. But too often, project data is scattered across tools and departments, creating risky silos. That's where Autodesk comes in. Autodesk is the all-in-one construction management platform designed to connect your entire project operation, from opportunity through to tender, all the way to handover. With real-time dashboards, cost control, scheduling, procurement, and document management in one place, Autodesk gives you complete visibility and control. Trusted by contractors, subcontractors, and asset owners worldwide, Autodesk has powered landmark projects from shopping centers to Europe's tallest buildings. If you're ready to reduce risk, protect your margins, and deliver projects with confidence, discover Autodesk today. Visit archdesk.com, that's ARCH desk.com, and see how leading firms are building smarter with Autodesk. Major construction projects are complex, and delivery leaders know that things rarely go to plan. The problem is that most teams don't see what's slipping or why until it's too late. The best construction leaders know that in order to deliver on schedule, everyone needs to be planning together, committing to targets, and tracking performance every day. By bringing look-aheads, weekly work plans, visual staging diagrams, and daily activity briefings into one multiplayer platform, AFEX gives the world's leading projects a single place to plan and coordinate their work. Join the largest contractors across Europe, the UK, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. Learn more at aphex.co. That's aphex.co. All right, Lee, thanks for joining. So, I was very interested. A few months ago, you came up on my LinkedIn feed, and you said you were in London, and we decided that we would meet, and so we did, a few weeks or so ago now. And just in our build up to meeting you, we were doing some kind of coaching and studying and consuming content about storytelling. But I never really put the two and two together. I knew it's important and people should be doing it, and we'll learn a lot more about it today through this conversation. But it wasn't until you and I sat down and you started I don't know if you were telling me stories, but we started to really get into the detail, and it suddenly clicked in my head that actually people should really be thinking about stories a lot more in how they describe their products specifically. And a key point that you made, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is that you said the best products. I don't know if you said this, but I think my takeaway was that the best products you don't even mention the product. Like it's like the story behind the product, and then maybe the product name comes at the end. So we will get into that. So I hope
Yeah.
that was your kind of reflection of our conversation that we had. So I'm excited to dive into this with you today. Welcome, Lee.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for inviting me onto this. Been enjoying the podcast, so it's good to be on it. So thank you.
Yeah. Cool. You're welcome. No worries. Let's do this. Before we go there, and we'll go into your story about like go to market, storytelling, blah, 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 Autodesk. I think you were at Autodesk for 18 years, so that's a good stint.
Yeah.
What would you say is the number one differentiator for a company that's looking to grow in AEC technology?
Oh, it's a big one. So I think AC technology is interesting. Been an interesting space for the last decade or so because there's been so much venture capital. There's been so many kind of companies competing in this space. When I started in the industry, it was few and far between. It was kind of all very AutoCAD PDF based, and the move to BIM was just about starting. And then since then, we've had, obviously this huge wave of technology and tools coming onto the construction site. I've been onto enough of those construction sites where you walk on with an iPad and they're like, "Oh, voodoo. No, we don't want any of that." So it's changed a lot over the last, 20 years. It's a very different industry than it used to be. That means that if you're one of these companies that's competing, I think it's even more important that you really understand who your customer is, what their needs are, really understand those personas that you're working with, and make sure that you've got a really clear story, that you actually know what you're presenting them with, because yeah, otherwise you're just going to find that you get lost amongst all these other technology companies that are trying to do the same thing, promising productivity, promising kind of all these huge challenges that, realistically you can contribute towards, but there's very few that can actually solve.
hmm So it's about, would you say it's like, yeah, would you say the story is a differentiator here, or is some like the product, or uh, the result of the product, like the outcome of using such a product?
I think it's everything. Like if you don't have a product, then it doesn't matter how good your story is. It really doesn't. But I think a lot of people listening to this wouldn't be in the industry unless they felt that they had something to offer the industry, um, and have tools that do that. So I think, you know, just having a good story is important. One of the things I think is really, really important is to actually understand from the customers, what is it they're actually asking for? Not necessarily what are the words they're saying of I need this, but what's the problem they're trying to solve and how are they trying to solve it? Um, Everyone will be familiar, with the I forgot, was it the Model T? It's like if we, if we just listened to what our customers wanted, we would have had a faster horse.
Yeah. Supposedly Henry
You're
Ford.
familiar? Yes. Yeah. So everyone's kind of familiar with that, and I think the people that are out on site kind of want to solve their problems immediately, and they just want this thing that's a bit better. But I think as technology, if you're coming from the technology world, you're looking at these problems in a very different way. You're going, actually, how can we, instead of taking you from 9 to 10, how can we take you from 9 to 20? So you need to listen to those problems and really understand what they are and how you can take them on a path from 9 all the way up to 20. So
Uh-huh.
you've got to kind of think about what it is they're asking for and how can you maybe solve that problem in a different way. Now, this is the key thing, how you then take all that and all these stories that you're using to help build your products and present them in a way that customers actually go, yeah, actually, you do understand me, you do understand the problems that I've got, and you're presenting this back to me in a way that I can see my path to take me from 9 to 20 instead of 9 to 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this would be about what you're describing would be in like an entire sales process from start to finish, not just in like one single interaction. By that I mean like the stories that you're crafting, not to overuse the word, are like, you having different stories at different points in the process? Are you like is there like a key kind of time that you would have one particular story? Do you have let's say, preset stories for different kind of stages within the sales cycle? Like how do you when are you telling these?
So I think that's a really good question. I think the way that I would probably look at it is yes, there will be different stories within there, but what you're normally doing is you're starting off with essentially a messaging framework, messaging pyramid. What is it we're trying to tell everybody at every layer? This is the thing we are trying to do. And everyone understands that internally, externally, as you're going out to your customers, they understand what you're about, what you're trying to do, how you're trying to change things. Um, and then once you've got that framework, it's a lot easier to then say, okay, so this is the sales angle on that same message. So here's a story that's going to help you set out your pitch. Here's a story which is going to help people who already bought the product, but then need to know how to implement it. Here's another story which is going to be really effective on social media going on. We're at this trade event. We're not here to sell you on this particular Instagram reel, but we're here to say, come and have a chat to us so we can then have that conversation with you about what we do. So it's about building kind of this consistent hierarchy of kind of messaging, which then lets you build all these sub stories off the back of it.
Mm, nice. So you kind of have like the foundation, which is like the framework, and then all your channels, situations are built on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just making sure that everyone's got a consistent language. It's making sure that, whether you are, whether you know, we'll talk about this as well, kind of like my history. I used to be in technical support, moved through sales, marketing, various go-to-market. I've kind of done quite a lot. Being able to understand what you're doing as a company means that when you're doing a technical support interaction, you're telling the same sort of messages as the salesperson told them two years ago when they bought the product. So it doesn't feel like there's a disconnect, because
Mm,
that's when customers can be dissatisfied, because they're feeling, well, I'm sure everyone's had it with, their internet service provider. Their internet service provider promises this amazing, fancy new world, and then they go to technical support and they say, "Well,
you
nah,
can't do
sorry,
that.
that doesn't." Yeah. It's just making sure, that's how you kind of end up with dissatisfaction. That's how you end up with churn and people leaving, because they just go, "Well, you're not telling the same story." But we're always familiar with those kind of situations.
Mm. Yeah, that's super interesting. Okay, I was thinking of this like specifically within a kind of sales context, but that's actually not true.
Yeah.
It's throughout the entire organization. Huh?
Well, everyone's a salesperson. There might not be sales, as in out and out, but you're all promoting the brand that you're working for. You're all trying to kind of get people to the same place, which is you want your customers to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are doing it by to get the product in there in the first place. Some people are doing it by building a product. Some people are doing it by, making sure that the product actually works once we've got it. But we're still trying to sell. So then next time round, they either renew or they're looking to buy new services from you or whatever else it may be. Everyone's a salesperson, so everyone kind of needs to know that same sort of language.
Mm, very cool. Okay, we'll dive into a few of these things in a little while. But before we go there, tell us about 18 years at Autodesk. I'm assuming what you do now. Maybe explain what you do now, and then we can go like talk about your years at Autodesk. But I'm assuming that the experience of
Hmm.
Autodesk led you to where you are now. So it'd be good to hear how the dots connected.
Yeah, no, I'll start kind of with what I'm doing now. So, I was working with Autodesk until August this year, so pretty recently, and I've just started a new company called BuildArc, and that company is basically about providing construction technology companies with help with their go-to-market, with their products, and kind of some of the stuff which I've learned in the past. It's also about helping those in the built environment with understanding the technology landscape, how they can start implementing tools, how they can identify the right tools to be implementing themselves. And then this third part, which is what we're focusing on today, is about storytelling. And that kind of comes from, I suppose, my entire career at Autodesk. I've just kind of seen how important stories are, and the frameworks and structure which people use to build stories is really, really important. So I'll talk more about that later, but I'll
Yeah,
kind of talk about how I got into this
go for it.
place, because I think that's really important.
Continue. Yeah, go down that
So
path.
Continue. Yeah. So I originally started a small little startup in Sheffield in the UK called
Oh
Navisworks.
yeah.
Navisworks Limited. So a lot of people in technology will be very familiar with Navisworks. It was kind of described as almost like this Swiss Army knife tool for the industry. This was at the same time where I would say Revit was kind of on the way up. But really the 3D tools that people were using, it was things like architectural desktop, the 3D side of AutoCAD. And then there was a lot of MicroStation and things like that. The problem that everyone had was how do you pull together, your structural model, your architectural model, your MEP model, and just essentially make sure it makes sense for us to go out onto construction site.
Mm.
So the main thing that we used it for was clash detection, but it was used a lot for visualization. It was used a lot for 4D simulation, the construction sequencing, kind of making sure things could get built in time. And I started there working in the technical support team. At that point, it was like a really small team. We had a US office and there was us in the UK. I think there's about 25 of us in total. So it was tiny. It was like a family business almost at this point. Um, and, you wear many hats. You support, but you're also doing all the testing. You're doing the, training guides. You're kind of helping anywhere where you need help. You're helping with sales calls, whatever it was needed. And then about 2 years later, 2007, Autodesk came in and acquired Navisworks. I continued in the support world. I was looking after a global team. Navisworks, as you can imagine, grew really quickly at that stage.
Mm.
So it was about how we managed to kind of just keep on top of all these new people using Navisworks and kind of getting across problems. One of the key things I'm going to say there that was really important for me to understand was we talked about, people want a faster horse. One of the most important questions I kept asking all the time was, what are you trying to do? What's the end objective of the thing that you are trying to use this tool for? Because then that would change potentially the workflow, the process that they're using the tools for, which then might mean that the support problem that they have is never even an issue in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding almost the story and why they're using the tools, is kind of moving to the next stage. Then over my career, I kind of moved into enterprise support. So that was looking after, these huge general contractors, main contractors and how they are using the tools. And that was really this kind of change from almost support, which is reactive. This thing has gone wrong. I need help, to being a little bit more proactive and what we probably now today call customer success.
Mm.
So helping them minimize issues, helping them be more productive, helping them really get the most out of these tools we've already bought. So I did that for a number of years. At this point, I started doing public speaking, which was terrifying. I was the guy who would be back in the queue if anyone said go and stand on the stage. But I started kind of doing a whole bunch of public talks. And the one which I'm going to be really honest, the one that literally changed my career was I did a talk at Autodesk University called "Building the Death Star the Autodesk Way."
Nice.
Yeah,
Good
it was.
title.
The reason I did that, actually, there's a really interesting reason. I was being asked at that point, because Navisworks was used for everything. So I was being asked, can you do a talk on how you use it for roads and bridges? Can you do a talk on how it's used for buildings, oil rigs, ships, kind of all this kind of stuff? Well, I can't do 6 talks. I just physically don't have time. And I'm a sci-fi geek. So I basically went, um, how can I take all the principles of what we are trying to learn about and then just take it into a completely abstract situation so we can just show what the tools do and show how you can use it for a different purpose. So I just took this silly concept of, right, the building the Death Star. This is obviously pre-Andor, pre-Rogue One, pre all the new films, and how can we basically show people how these tools could be used to build this abstract thing. And that literally changed my career because people were looking at it and going, actually, that's how you tell a story. I had
Yeah.
a come to me recently said that literally changed how he did technical sales from that point onwards. So that's like what, 13, 14 years ago, and he's changed because it can be fun, it can be entertaining.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
from there, I then moved into. Oh, fine, fine.
Yeah, I was just saying on that point. So rather than do a speech about all these 6 different things, you just like completely scrapped all of them and was like, all right, let me try and pick something that's related to people actually more, and what
Yeah,
people are interested and passionate about, and you covered it and done even better. That's an interesting thing to think about.
yeah, and just silly things like I was taking. I think it was like um, Moff Tarkin, and how as a project manager he might be using this data in one way, and how Darth Vader as the project manager, might need this, and how, and we were just again, we were just able to be a little bit silly with it, but just say, look, these are the personas, this is what they're trying to do, and this is how they can do it.
Mm.
But
Maybe there's a
it
hint
just,
there, like it's about humanizing things. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely, yeah. And there's definitely a thing of how you can take that persona and just put them in there so it becomes a little bit more relatable.
mm.
Just in case you're building a massive space station somewhere to destroy another planet, very relatable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've when we had the conversation a few weeks back, you said that you were also responsible for like the program at Autodesk University, and there was a lot of applications for people doing speeches, but something in particular in each of these talks stood out, and that was that, which then led you and the team to pick them as suitable talks for what was going on at Autodesk University. Could you tell that story?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, as I kind of moved through my career, so I moved into technical sales, and then over the last 5 years, I've been working on the program for the Autodesk University program. People who don't know Autodesk University, it's a huge conference, 10 to 17,000 people every year, kind of converging on an American city, talking about Autodesk products, but also talking about industry issues, talking about kind of like different industries as well. It's not just AEC, there's manufacturing, media entertainment. So it's this huge event. And one of the roles which I had was to how do we create the greatest program we can out of all these applications that come in. And what we're trying to do is we were trying to kind of balance out um, kind of this mix of the audiences that we've got. So we've got senior people in C-level positions. We've got technical people who are just trying to learn the tools. We've got people who are completely fresh and have never seen anything that, Autodesk had done before. And then we've got people that are incredibly experienced and have worked in these tools for years. So how do you kind of create this mishmash of all these elements? How do you create some really interesting talks, which maybe give you a completely different food for thought on a particular area? And in my case, I was reading through 3,500 proposals, trying to work out, you know, uh,
That's a lot.
I think less than 15% of those got in.
Mm.
How do we, which ones come through? And, there's like a huge number of things that we had to think about. So it was finding balance across these industries. It was working with these broader teams we had. So, we have a lot of industry experts all across the globe, and they were all inputting as to, we need to see more about this particular thing or more about this particular thing. So we're trying to kind of balance all this out. And what we were looking for was, firstly, a strong vision. Do you know what you're actually going to be talking to people about? I think everyone has submitted for a proposal, done it, at the last minute, done it in the last couple of hours before submission, and put something a little bit wishy-washy, a little bit vague, saying, "Well, I'll work it out later." Those don't get through. Like they just don't. You really want a really strong vision of this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm going to tell people. Um, a strong, catchy title. I mean, using mine as an example, building the Death Star, there's obviously a few people who are going to go to that just because the Star Wars
100%.
geeks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of really, really strong titles. It can be really catchy things like show us how this saved 80% of 80% of time on this thing. Getting stats in there can be really good, but just something that maybe surprises a convention, kind of like it really creates something you're not expecting to see,
Hmm.
because you're not just trying to get accepted. Once you're in the program, you're then trying to compete for this audience when there's 20 other talks on at the same time.
Mm.
So you need something interesting enough to go, well, I'll read the rest of the description. Does that align with something that I'm interested in learning? So you need both of those. clear outcomes, being really clear about what you're trying to build. What people are going to get out of it. Because everyone wants to learn something. Even if you're C-level, and you don't really care about the technology and tools, you want to see an outcome that says, why would I get this thing, or why would I be interested in this thing, rather than how to do these
Mm.
things. But you need to be very clear about what you're going to demonstrate. If you can, try and show some expertise in that area. Um, Try and demonstrate that. It's not always about having super experienced speakers and people that have spoken 6, 7 times before. It can also be about finding, those new speakers who've got a lot of experience with tools or in a particular area. I think we had a speaker a couple of years ago who was fantastic, Sarah Keat. Might be Kite, apologies if I pronounced that wrong, talking all about insurance and kind of how BIM and digital tools are being used to help in legal situations. And again, it was like a really strong title, experience in this area, and it's something which maybe the audience wouldn't have seen in that place before.
Yeah, very cool. And so I guess like to our theme of the discussion, it really does come down to maybe storytelling is part of it, but it's like really how you capture people's attention. Maybe one way is to do that is literally through stories, but also give them actionable stuff they can do with clear outcomes. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, you've just got to be really clear about what you're putting forward. I think it's for every conference, every presentation you do. Why are you there? What are you trying to tell people? What would the audience want to hear about? Um, if you're clear about that, that's going to help you at every stage. It's going to help you when you're writing your outline. It's going to help you as you're building things out. It's going to be a really good reminder for you to do that sanity check and going, am I still talking about the thing which I intended to talk about? Because I think we've all worked, done an all-nighter on a presentation and then realized, oh, that's not actually what the client asked for. That's not what, that's not what my boss is expecting to hear about. So it can be useful just to double check that you're actually telling the story that you're intended to tell.
Yeah, very cool. Nice. So there you go. The recipe for getting onto Autodesk's program at the Autodesk University.
Yeah,
Okay,
no
let's
guarantees.
yeah, nice. And so how then did all this lead to BuildArc?
BuildArc. So if I kind of talk a little bit about those last few years. So I was working in technical sales for a long time, and initially, that my understanding of that was really your job is there to prove what the sales guy is saying is correct. Like the sales guys have promised this amazing thing, and basically your job is to do the demo and demonstrate that it does what it does. As I moved through that, I realized actually it's about discovery and understanding really what the customers are looking for and what they want from that. But then it's relaying that to them in a story that's relatable, so they can understand it, and then they can then take that away to their management and their bosses. As much as we want to be the person that's
Mm,
presenting to the board, realistically, our biggest advocates are always going to be within the company. So you've
hmm
got to be able to tell a story that when that customer goes away, they can repeat it. And then you've always got that 2/3 rule. Whatever you've kind of put forward, even if you're kind of going, this is the story, they're always going to give their own version of it. So it's not going to be quite what you hope. So if you've got a clear story, that's then going to help them tell that clear story. And then right at the start of the pandemic, I was looking for a change. I've been doing that for like 7 years, I think it was. And this opportunity came across to kind of help manage this content program for Autodesk University. And at that point, I was very excited about this idea of how can I help tell our customer stories better, and this is the place to do it. So during that, I worked on a whole bunch of stuff. I worked on keynotes, the big shiny keynotes that you see in the huge halls. I worked on documentaries. Middle of the pandemic, I'm working on these documentaries. I'm sat in my dressing gown at 4 in the morning, directing one cruise in Australia. It was very surreal, but it was a really rewarding experience. We're doing things like master classes. We're kind of working, helping a lot of the speakers kind of build almost their TED Talk type talks that we had. We had these things called theatre talks, and we're helping kind of a lot of our customers really raise their speaker profile by telling me sharp, concise, impactful stories. And all these little experiences were kind of what led me to get really geeky about the framework of stories. And that's where I kind of, I was looking at, kind of how there's a book called Save the Cat. Save the Cat is essentially the Bible of if you're going to write a movie. This is the story that you've seen a million times before, whether it be Star Wars or Sliding Doors or, Love Actually. It's the same story. Um, they've got very different angles on them. Sometimes they break rules in slightly different ways, but essentially it's the same story. And how can you take these frameworks and put them into corporate language? How can you make your corporate talks interesting, engaging, entertaining? It's something we struggle to do. So that's where I really kind of wanted to focus in on how do you take a lot of this framework stuff uh, and then make it usable, because there's a lot out there and it can be really, really confusing as to know which bit to use when and how to use it. If you're speaking to a technical audience, it's very different than speaking to an executive audience. Um, and you need to use slightly different devices. So that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of show how you can use these to up level, whatever story you tell, whether it be written, video, keynotes, whatever it may be.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into this then.
Yeah.
Okay, so where should we start? Should we start from frameworks? Like, where would you typically start with someone if you were just working with them? Would it be from like a standard framework? Would you look at a certain part in their business, and then maybe we can follow that kind of structure to run through like a start to finish story engagement?
So it can be from all different angles. Some of the work I've done so far has literally just been analyzing materials that has gone out, that people are putting on their YouTubes, on their websites, looking at the videos that are already created and going, is this having the impact it's intended to? And if not, why not? And sometimes it's just looking at then using a case study video, which I'm sure many of the audience will have gone and paid an agency, 3 grand, 5 grand, 20 grand, whatever, to go and create a case study, and they've got something back, and it looks nice, it looks
Hmm.
shiny, but then it's not had the impact. So then doing that analysis of going, actually, does it actually have a story arc? Does it kind of build any emotional tension? Does it, um, you know, is it using anything to really kind of get people to do that call to action at the end that you're asking them to do? So some of it is just, in the first case, just analyzing the content that's already there and going, is this hitting the mark? Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna
I'm
say
sorry.
like
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
So okay, fine. So first thing really is like looking at what people already have, and
mm,
then seeing how that can be improved. Yeah.
yeah. And I think some organisations know that it's not quite hitting the mark, so I'm happy to skip that step.
Hmm.
The next thing is then, essentially, if you're kind of going to do that bigger brand thing, you're going to need to do some sort of discovery workshops and work out where do you want to improve your storytelling. Is it a full top down? Is it a full top down refresh of everything, or you just want to focus on some areas? It could be there's a particular project that people are working on. So they've got maybe a keynote for, they've got a keynote for their customers, or they've got an internal meeting coming up, and it's just like, how can we start doing some of this stuff already? And then through that, you can have a number of smaller workshops or kind of engagements, which can be looking at what's the big idea, what's the big thing that you're trying to tell people, or what are the what are the customer proof points that you really want to take out, and how can we get the best out of those? Do we want to surface, for example, customer? Do we want to surface kind of get the customers to be telling our story on our behalf? That can be a really tough one, because
Yeah.
giving up control to the customer, but they are always going to be the best advocates because
Hmm.
they've been there. So, there can be all those kind of things as well. Helping people with things like hero and guides, and kind of looking at the characters that you've got within your stories. You mentioned right at the start, one of the things we had in our conversation a few weeks ago was, we were basically talking about how you change the story so a customer's gonna relate to it more. And a lot of that is based on who do you see as the hero of the story and who do you see as guide. And typically, what ends up happening is when, in any corporate, we want to tell our story because we've got this amazing product, or we've done this amazing thing, or we've got this fantastic speaker, and we end up kind of filling the airspace. But what you really want to be doing is you want to be putting your audience, which typically is going to be, your customer, you want to make them feel like the hero. You want
Mm-hmm.
them to be Luke Skywalker. You want them to feel like they can go through this journey from being a farm boy through to being a Jedi. You want to kind of take them on this journey. And the thing that you then become is you become the guide. You become Yoda. You're the one you're there. Look, we're experienced. We understand the industry. We know we can help you at every stage of the way. But really, it's up to you. And this is what we're here to help you, help you do that with confidence. We'll
Mm.
teach you how to fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. So, hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show. Yeah, so like, is there a key scenario you typically find yourself helping most? Like, for example, it might just be as simple as how people talk about their product. So, in a sales pitch scenario setting, for example, is that where people feel like they need most assistance with storytelling? Do you think, or is it or somewhere else?
So I think from the conversations I've had so far, remember I've only just started this, I think, but the conversations which I've had so far, and I think the conversations that I had when I was working on the other side of the fence with Autodesk, is most people kind of know that they need to they need to create case studies. That's a really good example. So they'll go and spend a bunch of money on creating a case study
Mm,
and then kind of get into this point where they're happy, but maybe a bit underwhelmed. And that's the kind of area where maybe I can, BuildArc can come in. We can help you. How do you build a storyline? So when you're going out doing your filming day, you've got all the pieces you will need to create that case study, potentially other content as well, which will then hit the mark, which will then allow you to kind of build up this kind of more emotional storyline, which then means the customers are a little bit more willing to listen to that story, but then also gives you additional content that you can use for social media, that you can use for, kind of some of those other clips and other areas that you
mm.
need to work on. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. What could you then give us an example? Like, what would be like a bad? This use case study as this example you've that seems
Yeah.
to come up more, versus a good one.
I mean, yeah, there's so many, and like I don't want to kind of pick out a specific example that I've seen because I think we're all aware of. I think the big challenge at the moment is we know AI is the thing which all of the C-level are, are excited about. They want to understand how it's going to help their business. And what's then happening is we're getting kind of a lot of these pitches that are going out and these stories that are coming out, which are basically like, you know, our AI-driven tools will allow you to do X, Y, Z, and it feels a little bit inhuman. So it's about how do you create the human side of that. So it could be, Dave, the architect, is looking to do their energy analysis. At the moment, it's taking them 2 days. It's taking them 2 days to go through a bunch of spreadsheets and do all these manual checks and create a report that we need to. Using our tools, they manage to do it in just a few clicks. And then you talk about the human element of what that then allows them to do. And it's
Mm.
not necessarily what it allows them to do as in it creates a report. It's about what's the human element of that. So
Like,
for 2 days,
spending more time with kids. Do you go as far as like
yeah.
that, or is that a little bit how do you say cringe?
I think it's how you do it. I think it's how you do it. I mean, I think the spending time with your kids, we all know if he's finished his report after his 2 day report and he's finished it in a few hours, he's not going to be going home spending time with the kids as much as as much as he'd like to. we know he's going to end up kind of going on to something else. Maybe if I kind of talk about another project that I'd worked on in the past, because it's a good example of
Yeah.
this. One of the things we worked on was a thing called masterclasses, and what we wanted to do was take away these technical videos, and again, we spend thousands on these technical videos, tons of time on creating this technical content, and this is how our tools work. And what we wanted to do was again just make it a little bit more human. And actually, the brief that I kind of gave was, how do you almost take this kind of higher level technical sales pitch and turn it into a reusable video, a reusable piece of content we can use for lead generation? So what we wanted to do was take essentially technical sales. We found, we'll give you one example. We had a guy called Esteban who previously been a project manager, construction project manager, and we were talking to him about some of those real difficulties, those real human pains that he had as a project manager. And he was talking a lot about, the fact that he's in bed at night thinking about the next day, thinking about the email that he probably should send now rather than in the morning so he'll forget. And kind of all these little things where your brain just gets full. And then just talking about actually, and then moving into an electronic project management system, which was at that point. How do you then use these tools to then clear your head a bit so you can be a bit more present with wife and present with the kids? Yeah, it's a little bit cheesy, but actually that's the life of a project manager. They spend their entire life thinking about the next day, thinking about what's going to happen. So they're not 100% present. And if you can help with that, then you should talk about it. But I would say it's thinking about not necessarily thinking partly about what's the actual outcome, which helps you, get it through the board, but actually you're trying to connect with a person and that person has that problem. So talk about, talk about the challenges that they have, talk and show that you understand, but it's not just how can we use AI to improve our data-driven insights? How can we use AI to give you a little bit more free space in your brain so you can concentrate on the stuff that really matters?
Yeah, and also I think I'm getting here is like keep it realistic as well. Like at least if it is something a scenario that can actually happen where and the pain someone actually feels, so it becomes because it's believable. Is there do you like say you have these case studies and obviously um there are like 5, 6 personas of people that might be reading a case study. How do
Mm.
you how are you thinking about prioritizing like you mentioned this hero and guide concept? How
Mm.
do you do you create are you creating separate case studies for potentially each persona? Is there like a key persona that you should just focus on in each case study? Are there like different ways you can structure it so it talks to each of them?
I mean, it depends what you want to do. I mean, it so much depends on the individual situation. So using, that example, if you've got if you've got a case study and one of your personas is essentially the buying persona, realistically, you want to get value from it. That's the persona you should be focusing on and targeting. However, we know there's not just one buying persona. There's a lot of people that are recommending and proving stuff out. So it might be you're creating multiple, but actually it might just be you're thinking about here's the things which will help all of these supporting personas to back up what that buying persona says. So it's just thinking a little bit about, does this need to be one? Does this need to be multiple? If you think about, you're aware of the marketing funnel,
Yes.
kind of how that works. Um, so if you've got things that are, in there at that top of the funnel, really wanting to kind of be pulling in technical personas who are going
Mm,
to make those recommendations, but you're very rarely going to have that be the same piece of content which an operations director might want or somebody else might want. So you're going to be using those top of the funnel pieces of content to get them into a different place, and then when you're getting down to the case study where they're looking at I suppose social proof, that's one where you can hit multiple things.
mm,
I also think this is where the case studies don't just have to be linear and we will only talk to that persona. You can build in layers where it kind of gives you that social proof of the technical person. It gives you the social proof for the buying persona who can see that other people have used that same tool and it's worked for them. There's different ways of doing it, but you can think about how it hits multiple
makes complete
pieces.
sense. Yeah, nice. Lee, what are some of the frameworks? Like, are there any simple frameworks that people can do which could actually have like a very large impact on perhaps if they're just putting things out there? Is there a small tweak, like a thing that they could make, i.e., by following like a 3-step kind of framework to think about how they write things or
I
present
mean,
things?
preset, but I mean the basic one is the three act story. We do it already. I guarantee everybody out there will already be doing things in 3 steps, but depending on where you're using the content, you might want to think about those 3 steps differently. So everyone knows, beginning, middle, end. Everyone knows that story. We learned that in primary school. We learned that as a small kids. We know how those stories work. The reason why it works as a framework is you've got this familiarity with it. You know that once we've got past that middle stage, we know that the end stage kind of is about building conclusion. It's about building kind of this right, what next? Or we've got this happy ending. Using that free act, you can use it in different ways. So I think the most common one is using problem, change, outcome. So what's the problem? What's the change that happened? And that can be, was there a catalyst that created this change? Or was it people kind of went through this change on their own? It's unlikely that it's completely in a vacuum, but often there's a catalyst. And then what's the outcome from it? So I think that's the most common one, and you can use that in lots and lots of places. One which I really love, one which I used a lot, was context, contrast, and call to action.
Mm,
Very similar. It's all very, very similar.
mm,
But for me, this really works as a story because you've got context is about setting the scene. That's saying, where are you? What's going on? Then contrast is about almost this sawtooth diagram of this is where you are, this is where you could be. Let's take you back to where you are to where you could be, where you are to where you could be. And with all of these, if you think about, how this works in movies, and I'm going to go back to Star Wars again because
you love
that's what I
Star
do.
Wars.
I do love things. A lot of us do, but you'll notice the same thing will happen in The Holiday, it will happen in Dirty Dancing, it will happen in everything. It's what you'll have is a hero's journey. They will start off in a place. So Luke on the farm, then he'll see this little element of, ooh, what's the force? Then he'll kind of come back with a bit of a bump, and then he'll kind of see a little bit more. And he'll come back with a bump, and then he'll finish off destroying the Death Star in his X-wing. But building this up means that it's not a sudden jarring thing of you're now where you could be. You've kind of seen this progression in this path, and it creates small steps. So how this works in context kind of world can be, well, this person started off, they started using our tools, and they found this really quick win. Then they carried on using the tools to the team, and then this created this slightly bigger win. And then now the whole team's using it, and then it's created this big cultural change, which then leads you into your final act, which is then your call to action. And this is what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to get them to the point of we understand the tools. We now know what you do. We now know that we can potentially go on this path. How do we get there? And that's where you tell them. That's where you say, scan this QR code for, to speak to a salesperson.
Mm.
Um, or, to go to our website and fill in this form or whatever it may be. The call to action is the most important piece. Otherwise, you're just telling a nice story. And people go home and go, oh, well, I felt nice, warm, and fuzzy. But the thing we want is the next step. We want to kind of take it into a sales lead. We want to take it into a funnel. We want to do whatever we want to do with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, literally translated, is like you have your hero, as you say. They make some progress with a tool. This then allows another piece of progress, which then allows another piece of progress, which gets them to. Is it? Would you say a desired outcome, or not necessarily? Like, so for like, because we go, yeah, like one win, another, which led to another win, which led to another win, which led to another win.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on what your big idea is. If the thing that you're selling is productivity, you want to demonstrate that over and over and over again. If the thing that you're selling is, cultural change, then it's going to be a very different type of story.
Mm-hmm.
If you're selling, analysis tools. Analysis tools are kind of obviously really interesting at the moment with AI, and there's a lot of tools on the market. Then the thing that you're building is you're kind of showing that you're building a new muscle. You're building this potential income stream, or you're building, you're building kind of a new way of doing business that you maybe couldn't do before. But it could also be productivity. It could also be I do this thing quicker.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then you round that off with, yeah, whatever. Want to find out more or want to save X or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like auto actions are really interesting because they can be so different depending. If you're doing a keynote, if you've got the CEO of your company, you don't want the CEO of the company saying, right, everyone get your phones out, QR code, and we'll give you a free demo. You want them to give a higher level call to action. So that's where you might be taking them off to some additional thought leadership messaging, or you might be taking them to the show floor, or you might be doing different things with it. But the call to action is really important because if you think about what action you want people to do, it might actually change the story you're trying to tell because
Mm.
you want to kind of show how they place. I was reviewing a video yesterday where um, it was like a 4 minute long video. It was a really nice video, very heartwarming, very, very in touch with, you know, it pulled the heartstrings. It was great. It kind of did a lot of what it needed to do. And it came to the call to action. It was talking about this charity at the end of it. And at no point had the charity been mentioned throughout the whole video. So if the call to action is to go to this charity website, then why haven't we mentioned the charity during the video? Because if that's the point of doing it, then why would people go to that? So,
Mm.
so you've got to think a little bit about what you're trying to move them to, and how do you get them? How do you get them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. Because I'm trying to think of how I relate this to my point. I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, but about where we were talking, and I noticed a few things on people that do great marketing, and an example would be like Red Bull. I think if you go on the Instagram
Mm.
or they'd never see a can of Red Bull on there. You just
Yeah,
like it's people like telling the story like I drink a Red Bull, whatever. Where like it's they never really advertising the product as such, or at least the
yeah,
majority of their content is not like directly pushing you or showing you a Red Bull can. So, um,
yeah. I mean, Red Bull are a really interesting one because they are a marketing company. So you kind
yeah.
of look at it, they've got a Formula One team, they've got stakes in Formula football teams and this kind of stuff. So they're a slightly different one. Whereas if you compare it to maybe a Nike, and their advertising for decades has been just do it. It's been about the individual, it's been about the athlete, and they just happen to use their footwear. They happen to use wear their clothes, but it's about the athlete. They're the hero. They're the ones that you want to follow.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. What have we not covered here on storytelling? Hey, is there anything, Lee, that you want to like speak about or talk that I haven't asked or we haven't covered so far in this wall
Yeah, I
of
mean,
questions?
honestly, the framework stuff is stuff I get geeky about. So
Yeah,
I'll definitely talk a little bit more to some of that because I think
go
there's
for
some
it.
really interesting. So, um, if you kind of look at all these, if you do a quick search, you will find 20, 30, 40 books about how to tell a story. Done quite a lot of analysis on the overlaps between them, and then also kind of where they differ, because
Hmm.
some of them are very much aimed at brand level storytelling. Some of them are aimed at, how do you do a TED talk? How do you do this? So, you do get a lot of commonality, but you also get these gaps. And one of the big areas of commonality is about building conflict and tension. And I did want to cover this because I think it's really important for, marketers to really think about how do you build this into your marketing, because this is the bit where we're always a little bit scared and a little bit reluctant. And it's the bit which I think was probably the most conflict and tension I had in my role was about how do you tell a story where there is a low, there's a dip, there's kind of something bad that happens,
Hmm.
because if you can't show the dip, you can't show the way out.
Ah, that's
Um,
difficult in the corporate world, huh? Because everyone's perfect.
entirely. And I've got a really good example of one of the documentaries we did. It was this amazing theatre in Western Sydney. And construction is like, we know how much conflict there is in construction. That's just the industry that we're in. There's a lot of money made by lawyers in this industry. That's just how this works. Um, but we managed to get the client on board, and we managed to get the contractor and the subcontractors all to agree to this story. And one of the things we wanted to pull out was the biggest moment of conflict, the biggest moment of tension in this story. And basically, it was the owner wanted to make a change, a significant change. I think in this case, we wanted to kind of increase the size of the orchestra pit after it had already been built.
Hmm.
So, it's not a small change. And the problem they had was it was a theatre, they'd already started booking shows. So the deadline wasn't going to move.
Oh yeah,
They
I could
just
feel
had
the
to,
tension already.
you can. And as a storytelling piece, without that, this documentary would not be the same. It would basically be a case study at that point. It would just be, you know, here is how we use the tools, and it was great. Thanks, guys. And that's good, but you're not going to get people really bought into how good these tools are and how they can really help you make changes unless you show that actually we had pretty rubbish time trying to get through this thing.
Uh-huh.
So we had to get everybody on board to actually show what the challenge was and show actually this happens. It's a normal thing, but it creates conflict and tension. We had a similar one with the F1, the Formula One in Las Vegas when they were building the pit complex. Partway through the build, they decided they wanted a tunnel underneath to allow pedestrians to go through. They had an 11-month build cycle. They didn't have a lot of time to build this thing, but you need to be able to talk about that to then go, and this is how we got through it, and this is how we delivered. The thing that people are just terrified about is how do we tell that story in a way that we kind of keep everyone happy all the time, keep everyone at the top end of the story arc. And sometimes, you know, in context, if we're going out to customers, we need to be able to have that frank conversation saying, we really want to tell your story. And the thing that you did is amazing. We just need to work out how do we present it in a way that you, the client, the subcontractor are all happy. And we just talk about this being as a normal thing because
Mm.
it is.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. I really, really like it. I do remember listening to a podcast some time ago and actually like whatever, 2 hour, 1 hour podcast on storytelling. And the key thing I took away from it was about like outcome and tension. Like the
Mm.
simple two ingredients of a story is like what outcome you were trying to achieve, what was the tension that stopped you from preventing that outcome, and how do you form your story around that? And like usually that gives you a very good foundation for telling something. Do you have any advice for people that is it, or maybe is there a simple way or a simple framework or something that they can use to tell a story? And let me just preface this a little bit. Like when I, for example, am thinking like, okay, it would be cool to form a story around this. I'm like, oh my god, there's like 20 different frameworks I could do. Maybe this one is slightly better than this one, or that one is slightly worse, and I won't use this one because of this and whatever. And then yes, you actually just end up like really procrastinating on the idea, getting overwhelmed with the amount of options out there, and you end up probably 9 times out of 10 doing nothing or just writing it as you normally would. Is there any like do you have any advice to that? Like if there's just one thing that people could do to help them, what that could be?
Um, so maybe it's just like a methodology I use more than anything else, which is, starting off really bare bones and kind of essentially building out a framework you're going to use. So in my case, what I tend to use is say if I'm using the context, contrast, call to action framework, I'd start off just with that as bullets, then basically kind of go, okay, what are the 2 or 3 key points you need to know about the context? Then I'd look at the call to action next, and I would actually then go into the call to action and then go, what are we trying to get people to do from this video or blog or whatever it may be? Then I would go backwards and go, what are 3 stories which help show some contrast between like where we are and where we could be that build up to this call to action? So what's connected to that? And then at that point, I then look, do we need a little bridge between the context and that first story? Do we need a little bridge between the third a third story and the contrast. Oh, sorry, and the call to action. Do we need any other little bridges there? And at that point, you've got an outline, and that normally is the hardest bit because once you've got that, it's quite easy to flesh it out. It's quite easy to work out. Okay, well, if we're going to tell this story like video, who are the people we need? Who are the talking heads we need there? What are the questions we need to ask them? All this kind of stuff. It's a lot easier to kind of work backwards at that point
Mm,
from what you're trying to do. The other kind of key things I'd probably say just related to that is firstly think about what's the big idea, what's the big thing you're trying to get across by doing this piece of content. If it's you've got a brand new feature, great, you've got a new feature, but what's the big idea you're trying to get across? And let's say it's this will save you 20 hours a week, whatever it might be. Then that becomes the call to action, say 20 hours a week by doing this thing. And then and then you just make sure that you frame everything where the customer's the hero instead of your tool. Um, and then work out, is there anything that you need to do to prep people for this big idea? Is it so big an idea that they're not going to believe it? Do you need to kind of build something into the context so they
mm,
understand actually, AI has completely changed this, or this industry has changed, or this data is now available, but it's never available before, and talk a little bit about these things, which then mean that when you introduce your big idea, they're more willing to accept it. They're more willing to kind of accept actually that's believable, or that's something that I might now be interested in.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right. This is a really interesting one. Context, contrast, call to action. So context would mean like could you just explain simply what that would be? Context?
Um,
Maybe with
so
an
if I kind of go
example?
back, yeah, so if I kind of go back to my, technical sales days, um, we'd be going out, in my role, I was, I think, probably the first person going out essentially selling BIM 360. What was BIM 360 Glue, BIM 360 Field in those days later became Construction Cloud. And a lot of that, so I'm using the example of, going out with the iPads out onto a construction site and people giving me these crazy eyes. Um, at that point, basically the context I was generally setting was the industry, sorry, the whole world has moved forward really, really quickly. So the context I'd be providing would, depending on the customer, would either be, here's a little brief history of how mobile devices have changed to the point where you should now think seriously about bringing them onto site, or there'd be a little bit more context around, what's happened on that site, which might mean that collecting digital data is going to help them in a slightly different way. But that
Hmm.
context really is relevant to whichever conversation you're having, but set them up so they then understand when you then show them that this can be used for snagging, this can be used for checklists,
Yeah,
that they're
okay.
ready.
So would is a fair term to say like setting the scene?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, all these frameworks, you'll hear different
Yeah,
words for
yeah.
exactly the same thing. Yeah.
I'm trying to do it, translate it so my simple brain understands it. Okay,
Oh, no, it's all good.
and contrast would be okay. You actually step to step in your previous example. We'll go to the call to action. That I think
Yeah,
that's quite self-explanatory. What that is, what you want people to do as a result of consuming the story or whatever it might be. But the contrast after the
yeah,
context is like so. You've set the scene. You're now talking about like yeah. What happens? How would you describe that?
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, so if I go back to the previous examples, this is like, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, I'm out doing this. And I think you'd still have a lot of companies still doing the same sort of thing. But if you're basically saying, this is what you do today, this is what you could be doing. This is what you do today, this is what you could be doing. So it might be I start off with, here's how you view your plans today, literally getting people out with their big A2 plans and big bits of paper. And then this is how much easier it could be if you're using a digital tool.
Mhm.
And that's where you pull up the iPad and you do the same thing. And then you might do the same thing with a snagging list. This is how you do your snags today. This is how it could be. Um, and then the benefits that you might see, what are the outcomes that you're going to get from that? And the final one then might be, how do you do your quality checklists? And I would generally finish on that one because it then gives you good data, which then helps to kind of show, well, actually, you can see trends, you can kind of see these other things. So you can see each stage of it is going, here's something simple, here's something more complex, and then here's something that is pretty simple for you, but will help people back in the office will help people, back at headquarters.
Mm, wow, super. Okay, Lee, looks like we're coming up to the end. I think we could talk the story for some time, but I also don't want to
Mm,
overwhelm people because I know it can be quite
it's a lot.
novel and it's like another thing to think about for people. So I think there's enough here for someone to get
Yeah.
started. And of course, if people feel like they need additional help with this and go to market and marketing, you're clearly a expert in this area, so they should reach out to you and see if they can see if you can work together to help them tell better stories.
Yeah, feel free. Yeah.
The industry needs you. Cool. All right, Lee. On that note, yeah, tell people where they could find out a little bit more about you, and BuildArc, and yeah, we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is www.buildarc.co. Uh, you can contact me on lee@buildarc.co. Arc with a C, not with a K. We're not going down that route. And then you can find me on all the various social media channels as well. Yeah, feel free to kind of search me on LinkedIn and add me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a chat.
Awesome. Lee, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, Owen.